Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. Michael Zuber, Run Rental at a Time, back with the CEO of Hemlane and featured guest on the show. How you doing, Dana?
I'm great. Thanks, Michael, for having me.
Absolutely. I hope you enjoyed New Year's and time away.
I did. It's been so long since I've seen you, 2021.
Yeah, it's all last year, man. All last year. I haven't talked to you since last year. Oh, that's awesome. Hey, Dana, one of the things I wanted to talk about, because again, in the residential real estate game, landlording, obviously a lot of people get it for cash flow. That all starts with rent. So I thought we should talk about how Hemlane helps with both rent collection, communication, and then also communicating rent increases, because we've seen rents are going up across the board. So how can Hemlane's platform help a new landlord kind of track and communicate all of that?
Yeah, great. So just to start with rent collection, one of the most important things to just start with before you're even looking at a property management system is having acceptable forms of paying rent.
Yep.
And what I mean by that is you don't want to tell the tenants, you owe me this money and you can just spend it any different way. Because one, it might get lost in the mail. Two, it might be something that's easy to dispute, like using a consumer app like Venmo for it. And three, there's also just regulations around it. Like you as a landlord here in California, now every state is different, but here in California, you cannot tell a tenant you're required to pay me online. That you can't do. You have to give them one offline option. You can
Okay.
tell them it's a money order, and then they're probably going to be like, okay, fine, I'll pay you online. But you do need to kind of set it up that way with a process that you have where you say, here are the acceptable forms of payment. So what we do at Hemlane is obviously we recommend that you have one offline form like a money order.
Okay.
And then on top of that, you say, or you can do it online via Hemlane's property management portal. And the only time we've ever seen this is actually really interesting about the data too. Whenever we see pushback from a tenant of using an online system to pay rent, it's for a couple of reasons, and I'll divide them into two categories and then let landlords know how to tackle that.
Okay.
One category is just they need to be educated. They are concerned with online systems because of security,
Sure.
which is well warranted. Like if a tenant asks about security, that's a good thing.
Yes.
It means they're on top of things. They're wondering about security. They're wondering if it's automatically going to take the funds, just education, which is very easy to get someone around paying rent.
Yep.
The other tenants who don't want to pay online is because they don't want things tracked. They don't want late fees.
Yeah.
And they probably don't want to pay on time. And they want to tell you that the rent check was probably lost in the mail.
Yeah.
And on the 20th, they'll be sending another check. And so it's really important to distinguish between those. And this is where communication is very important, having a process. And then if a tenant, as you grow your portfolio and build an empire like you, Michael, then suddenly what happens is you do have these outlier cases with tenants. Sure. And you kind of have to understand, you're kind of this detective to figure out, well, why do they not want to pay online? Is this something I can get around? Is this going to be a problem where they're just trying not to follow the contract? So from there, anyways, I'd say 98% of the time we see things smooth. Tenants go online, they can set up automatic payment where every month it just gets deducted from their account. In our system, and I think a lot of other property management systems do this as well, we tell the tenants 3 days in advance, just as a reminder, we're going to be deducting this amount from your bank account because it's such a large amount.
Yeah.
We want to remind them, hey, make sure you have sufficient funds. We would hate for day 2 or 3 for insufficient funds to come through, and now the payment is delayed to the landlord. So that's the first thing, is just communication of you have rent coming due. Have you scheduled it to be paid in the system? If not, here's the button to go ahead and click pay. You can schedule it for the due date. So you could go in the system, today's January 20th. You could go in the system and say, great, February 1st, I want to schedule for that to be paid. Or you can say, I want not only February 1st, but every payment to be scheduled to be paid. So there's that with the online rent. And then if tenants don't pay, you on the day after it's late,
Yep.
We send them notifications saying your rent payment is late. And if they have late fees, we'll also tell them late fees that they have
Yep.
that would be initiated if they don't pay by the late fee date. Late fees have to be paid before the rent. And that's just to make sure that you as the landlord don't have to have that conversation of a tenant sending you $1,200 and you're like, it's actually $1,220 or whatever your late fee is.
Right.
The system will communicate all of that for you. So that's kind of upfront, like getting started with rent collection. I can also go into renewals as well.
No, I think that's important because again, I love how the system kind of removes the emotion. Emotion is often a thing anytime money is involved. And I think the system, again, automatically sending a late notification is key. And again, it's tracked, it's auditable. When there is a dispute, you have all of that. That didn't exist 20 years ago when Olivia and I started. So just having a system there that you set up once and it just operates is awesome. Now let's talk about rent increases. We've seen rent increases, if you believe the stats nationally, are up 15 to 19%.
Wow.
Some areas have rent control. Obviously, California does, not for houses, but for units, at least as I understand it. And but other states, I've had people on the channel talk about raising rents 25%, which shocks me as somebody who used to be happy with 3%. So, how are you communicating, rent increases are coming? What's the timeline? Does the system help with that?
Yeah. So the first thing to understand, and this may be elementary for a lot of you on the show, but it's like, can you increase the rent legally? So in other words, if you're in a lease contract and it expires in 6 months, you can't raise rent before that. You've agreed for the past 12 months or the past 6 months and 6 months more for that particular rate. So it's the first thing to keep in mind. But once you're on a month to month, or you're on or you're just coming up on renewal, that's when you can start looking at what are the rental rates in my area and what is fair for my tenants for that rent increase. And incentives are always there. Like, you want to align incentives, and I can't emphasize that enough, where you have to put yourself in the tenant's shoe and you have to put yourself in your shoes and understand, okay, if I raise it all the way to market rate or above market rate, I might risk vacancy. And if I have great paying tenants, that could be a concern. But if I do slightly under market rate, tenants don't want to move if they're happy with the place, which I assume they are because you're all great landlords. So they're not going to want to move. And so I can raise it up to about this amount. It's fair for me, but my tenants are also getting a deal because it's slightly under market. So you want to start thinking about those types of things. And you also want data to back it up. So like, we have a rent estimator tool on Hemlane. If you go to resources.hemlane.com, we have a tool where you can put in your property address and get a rent estimate. However, I also say that's an estimate based on historical data of what places have rented for. You could just put yourself in the shoes of a tenant. Go on Zillow, go on Zumper, and type in your property address and say properties for rent around here that have the same, 3-bedroom, 2-bath as me, similar in square footage. Although I know we've spoken about square footage sometimes isn't as important. What are properties going for? Because that's exactly the analysis your tenant's going to do. And then from there, you can kind of know what that rent increase is. So we have the tools for you. You can also put yourself in the tenant's shoes and do it. From there, we have the lease renewal contracts. One thing I highly recommend with those is giving 2 options. Now, not everyone does this, but having like a month-to-month option that's much higher. Really high. It's almost like a short-term lease, like a 30-day rental, where it's much higher because they have a lot more flexibility. And then, hey, the other thing is 12-month lease. If you want a 12-month lease, I will go ahead and raise it by not as much. And it's still slightly under market rate. The benefit to that is then that annual lease, that 12-month lease looks so much better for your tenants. And they're like, wait, I want to go with the annual option. It's much lower, rather than just giving them the annual option and them saying, I can't believe you're raising rent. It suddenly makes it look good. Also, because we're in January, Michael, one other thing I would say that's important is understanding your market.
Yeah.
So there's some markets where a winter turnover is great. I think Arizona is probably one of them.
Probably
where
very
it's
good.
too hot to move during the summer. But a lot of markets, and especially in single family homes, which is what we talk about every day, people have kids in school. They don't want to move during the school year. And December, January, and especially February we see worse, are terrible months to move. And so you might go to your tenants, if right now your renewal's up in February, and say, hey, rental rates are increasing. You said what, Michael, 15 to 18%?
Yep.
They're increasing by that. If you want to get locked into the next 18 months rather than 12 months at this price, I can do that. And then in 12 months, I'm not going to increase it more. That can get you onto a summer turnover. So it's really a good time with these rent increases, these notices, to make sure that you are, from that perspective, looking at the data and doing what is best for your real estate investments. On top of that, I can't emphasize how time is a good thing for you. And you want to check your state as well as county rules and regulations on how much time you have to give. 30 days, 60 days, like mobile homes is 90 days. How much time you have to give on these renewals is super important. And because it's, again, someone's home. So you don't want to do it the day right before and tell them you have 24 hours to make a decision. Again, this is a relationship. You want to be professional. You want to show you've been on top of it, and communicate that out and let them know you have by this date to let me know. We really hope that you stay. So it's a little bit about rent collection. Once you do the renewals, it's super easy in the system to just adjust the rent amount for the following year. And then the tenants are also politely reminded the next year not to send the $1,000, to send $1,100 or whatever the change in rent is.
Folks, one of the things I hope you take advantage that Himlane has given this channel is a 30-day trial and also a POC. If you go to the free course, there's a PDF with a 30-day trial. If you're in the paid course, there's actually videos of Dana walking through it. I would tell you to download the trial now, play with it, pretend to be a landlord, understand rent collection, leases, all of those things. Again, and where can they find that, Dana?
You can find all of that at www.hemlane, which you can see here behind me, Hemlane, HEMLANE.com. And when you do try the trial, just make sure you mention one rental at a time as well.
Very cool. Thanks, Dana.
Great. Thanks so much.